Okay, thanks for joining us, Stephen and Toni, candidates for Council District 3 in San Diego. Just briefly, the ground rules. We'll give you closing statements at the end for a couple minutes, but we'll just jump right into questions, no opening statement. And I'll be asking some of the questions that the board has kind of agreed to and workshopped ahead of time, but other members may jump in from time to time as we proceed. So thank you very much. For starters, why don't I, and I see that Toni has put her pronouns in the Zoom field, which I appreciate. But as you introduce yourselves with this first question, why don't you use your pronouns too, Stephen? And tell us, I want to spend some time talking about the last 6 months, right? So a lot has changed. You know, racial protests and the pandemic have changed many things. And I'm wondering particularly how the pandemic has shaped or reshaped your thoughts on housing and transit. And so, Stephen, why don't you go first?
Sure. Well, the pandemic has certainly exposed many of the vulnerabilities that we have as regards housing. In terms of people who are homeless, we have had to make sure to accommodate those folks. And I think that by and large, those who have wanted shelter in the convention center and elsewhere have been able to find it. It has also exposed our vulnerabilities with housing affordability. We have a great number of people who are at risk of losing their homes due to the challenges they face with housing costs. So if anything, it just heightens the critical nature of addressing homelessness and housing affordability. In terms of transit, there again, you know, we certainly have to improve our transit system. I think that, you know, we've seen a decrease in the use of transit as a result of the you know, concerns about being in close quarters with other people. And in fact, the transit agencies have reduced the level of service. I think once we get a vaccine, hopefully that will bounce back, but it remains to be seen. Homelessness, we're going to have to address it a number of ways. And I don't know that, would you like me to talk about now how I hope to address homelessness, or is that a separate question?
we can get to homelessness in a second.
Okay.
But like specifically, and let's stick with you, Stephen. Do you see? You mentioned an interesting point. People are using transit less. They're kind of worried about crowds. Will that bounce back? We don't know. Transit was already plummeting in parts of the country in the last decade or so. Mm-hmm. Do you have a fundamental different approach to transit now, to the use of transit, to building housing in dense housing near transit, or do you kind of have the same views you did before mid-March?
Well, I think I have the same views that we have to increase our abilities around transit. So let me just say a few words about transit. I mean, you know, there's a tremendous proposal that is before Sandag right now that would greatly improve our transit. You know, the question is, you know, we've seen a decrease in the use of transit. So why would we be building more transit when we're seeing a decrease in the use of transit? Well, I mean, that sort of begs the question, do you, you know, need the demand in order to build the infrastructure? Or do you have to have the infrastructure in order to create the demand? And I think that we don't know the answer to that question for sure, but the current status quo is not okay. You know, look at the wildfires that we have right now. The scientists would say that those are a result of climate change, the worsening firefighters, and that climate change is a result of greenhouse gases that stem in no small part from vehicle exhaust. So, you know, if we're going to be able to address, you know, these growing wildfires and you know, rising sea levels, we had better do something about the number of cars that are on our freeways, and that's going to entail transit. So I think we have to do what we can to improve transit and then really work to get people to adopt it.
Okay, and then before I move to you, Toni, I know you use the phrasing scientists believe. I just want to make sure you believe that too, or do you not?
Of course, yes, I
Okay.
believe it.
I just
I
want to be
believe in
clear on the
climate
record for that.
change, and it's not just me; it is also scientists. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Stephen. Toni, your thoughts on the pandemic and its how it's made you rethink housing or transit particularly?
Yeah, so thank you, Matt. And I just want to real quick before we start say thank you for having us today. Matt, congratulations on your recent election as well.
Thank you very much.
So the last 6 months have been difficult. They've been extremely challenging. You know, I'm a public servant. I've still been working, making sure that I'm helping to connect folks to the resources that they need, especially during this pandemic. We've seen a lot of folks that have not faced these types of challenges before that are having a hard time navigate through because they don't know the process. And so, you know, you're asking specifically about housing and transit. I talk to people every day that are worried about losing their homes or being kicked out of their apartments because they haven't been able to pay their rent or their mortgage for some of them for 6 months now. And we've had various changing things happening at the city level and at the federal government level and at the state level around tenant protections and landlord protections. So, you know, we're making sure that folks are aware of the current law that was signed by Governor Newsom on August 31st about tenant and landlord protections. But, you know, this just goes to show that we still need housing. We still need more housing. We need more housing that's affordable for lower income folks and for middle income individuals and families. For our essential workers, you know, we have folks that really have been taken advantage of for a very long time. And they were the folks that were making sure that our grocery stores were staying open, that we could still get what we needed to survive. So it's imperative that we still have a focus on housing, building more so folks don't have to pick and choose, you know, can I afford this? Or, you know, landlords can't pick and choose who they bring in because we will have more options. And then as far as transit goes, you know, it's because we've been in this pandemic, we saw that the MTS ballot measure that we were going to see in November did have to get delayed. We're not sure how long that's going to be delayed, but it's still a focus that we will need to have, because with building more housing that's affordable at all income levels, we want to ensure that we're not so reliant on cars. We're not so reliant on, you know, one person in one car, you know, because this all goes back to climate change as well. You know, it's real. We know that. We've seen how, I mean, really our earth is telling us, hey, you know, you've done me wrong for far too long, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to fight back with that. And having transit options, more electric options, various options, whether it be buses or trolleys, you know, the first mile, last mile, what does that look like? Are we looking at better ways to use scooters and bikes? Are we looking at things like what we have downtown, Fred, which is a circuit where it's an electric, it's like a little electric golf cart that multiple people can sit in. But these are still very important conversations that we're having. And while transit may be lower right now, the ridership is low due to the pandemic because more people are staying home. It's not going away. We're not going to turn our back on the fact that we do need to build more transit, have more options, and make it available for more folks to make it more affordable and more convenient.
And I heard Stephen say that he supports the 5 big moves. Do you support Sandag's 5 big moves?
Yeah, I love that Hassan Ekrada has all these lofty goals and incredible ideas, and that's what we need. We need to be innovative like this, and it's going to cost a lot of money. And on the flip side, not doing this, it's still going to cost a lot of money if people want to build up more highways. So I would like to focus on putting that money towards something that can grow and be better for our city and be better for our environment.
And let's stick on Sandag and transit for a minute. In the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of stories, an editorial in our paper about Sandag's new scandals, as well as a cartoon by Steve Breen. You know, we've seen this story before. Here we go again. 5 Big Moves is $177 billion. It's going to require some voter support. It seems like every time Sandag starts to turn a corner, they shoot themselves in the foot again. Do you trust Sandag's staff to do the job? And how, as a council person, would you work to ensure what you just said, which is that the city needs better transit? And Toni, why don't you go first? Yeah, okay. You go first, Toni.
Thanks, Pat. Yeah, so we've seen that transparency and accountability are huge issues. And if we're not, as elected leaders, making sure that we are holding not only ourselves accountable, but the people that we're listening to, the people that we go to for information, if we're not holding them accountable, then we're not doing our jobs. And so if there are further issues, you know, just like we've seen at the city level itself in the real estate department, if we're seeing that there are folks at these levels that are showing that trust is going to be an issue, then we need to look at who do we bring in that we can trust, because we have the entire city of San Diego to answer to, and it's up to us to make sure that these questions are being answered and asked, and to make sure that we are doing what's best for our city, and we're not wasting money on things that aren't working.
Stephen, how would you address the Sandag trust issue?
Well, I'm not in a trusting mood right now when I look at everything that has been going on in our city and in our region. I don't think that we necessarily want a council member who's there to trust. I think we want a council member who's there to verify. So I intend to serve on the Sandag board if I have that opportunity. And, you know, there's obviously some problem there. You know, I'm not sure that we know enough yet to get to the root of exactly what the problem that there is a factual discrepancy as to whether the you know, executive director had the right to do some of the things that he did in terms of personnel. That's a fact. I mean, you know, we'll have to see who was right about that. Was the auditor right, or was he right about that? You know, the idea that some of the audits appear to have, from the reporting, appear to have been altered. You know, I mean, you would want to believe that an independent audit is an independent audit and ought to come out independently. So, you know, there's a lot we're going to learn. I have concerns. I'll be interested to see what actually is the case. But no, I'm not going to trust any staff anywhere. That's my job, is to independently verify and act on behalf of the people.
How another big thing that's changed in the last 6 months is the scope of racial justice protests nationwide, including here in San Diego. And obviously policing is a huge issue. So let's talk about that. Tasha Williamson, you know, as a mayoral candidate, said that she wanted to replace the chief. And we talked a little bit about that in March. But since then, there have been massive calls to reform and change the police department and its budget. How have these protests changed how you view policing? And what would you do to the budget? And Stephen, why don't you go first?
Sure. Well, I absolutely share the frustration of the many hundreds of people who testified before the city council and called for the police department's budget to be cut. There have to be reforms, but I also think that we have to match the solution with the problem. And to the degree that we identify the problem as racial disparities in policing, it's not necessarily clear to me that cutting the budget is the way to get at racial disparities. Cutting the budget because so much of the San Diego Police Department budget is personnel, cutting the budget reduces the number of officers. Right now, the city of San Diego has one of the lowest, if not the lowest, per capita number of officers of any big city in the nation. Right now, the city of San Diego has one of the, if not the lowest crime rate of any big city in the nation. So I'm not sure that the right approach is to cut the police department's budget for the sake of cutting the police department's budget. I think that we need to take on the specific problems head on, and that is the disparities in policing. And, you know, data shows obviously that we have them. I mean, the SDSU study shows that Black people are stopped at a higher rate than white people, and searched and questioned, and we need to address that disparity. I have endorsed the independent Commission on Police Practices that will be on the ballot in November. And if it is passed by the voters, I will play an important role in making sure that it is implemented properly. And there are a number of things that we're going to have to do. We're going to have to hire an executive director. I want to make sure that we hire someone who has specific experience with investigatory commissions. I think that's important. We're going to have to fund it properly. The IBA, the Independent Budget Analyst, says that it will require between $1.1 and $2.3 million, depending on the number of staff. I want to make sure we fund it at that level. We're going to have to hire, we're going to have to appoint the commission, figure out a process to do that, and appoint the commission members. I want to make sure we appoint members who reflect the makeup of the community, who have the time to invest in this, who will use their independent judgment. We also are going to be launching an Office of Race and Equity. Both of those bodies will have the opportunity, and in fact, I hope the mandate, to make recommendations to the police department and the city council on specific things that the city can do to address racial disparities. And I think the city council will need to listen, take those seriously, and act on them.
Toni?
Yeah, so Matt, this has been a big focus for me, especially these past 6 months, being a part of the protests that have been happening throughout our city, listening to folks that have been over-policed, listening to people in neighborhoods that feel over-policed. And the thing is, it's not an entire police force. It's not every single peace officer that we're looking at, but this is a nationwide problem and a nationwide issue. And the fact that we haven't addressed it yet and we've let things slide for so long makes our good peace officers look bad. And part of this budgeting issue is that we're asking peace officers to do jobs that are not their jobs. This whole other job as given out. Our police officers are not mental health workers. They're not social workers. We should not be calling police if we see a homeless person on the street. We should not be calling the police if we see somebody that's having mental health issues that needs help. And part of the reason why the police budget has to increase so much is because of the amount of overtime that we're paying peace officers, because they're doing jobs that are not the jobs that they've been hired or trained to do. So I've said before that we need to have the best trained officers here in San Diego. Their pay needs to be on par as with other cities, but we also need to address these racial disparities, because we have, like I said, we have good peace officers, but we have a lot of bias as well. You know, Black and brown folks are stopped more often than a white person. Black and brown folks are having conversations with their children about what to do to stay safe and stay alive if they're pulled over or questioned by a police officer. We shouldn't be living our lives like that. You know, we should, you know, these are people that are there, that have been hired and trained, and that want to keep us safe. And so moving jobs out of the police department that are not their jobs, so they can focus on what they're there to do, and that's to keep us safe and to make sure that we feel safe. So this is not defunding. This is making sure that they're being paid for the job that they're supposed to do, and that we're not asking them to do something that they haven't been trained to do. We need to put that money back into the community to have mental health care workers, to have social workers, put that money back into the community to invest in folks before they reach the point where they're homeless, or before they reach the point where they're living on the streets, before they reach the point where they feel that they have to do something worse, do something bad just in order to survive. So
I'm
this
wondering,
is a huge conversation.
yeah, let me ask both of you. These issues have been out there for.
Matt, just for clarification,
Yeah.
Toni, you said that you've been part of the protests. Were you actually out protesting? You were?
I have been. Yes, I have.
Stephen, were you out protesting?
Yes, District 3 has seen the largest protests in the city, and I was marching with Black Lives Matter downtown calling for racial justice, you bet.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, and a similar question to kind of what Laura is getting at. I'm wondering, these issues have been around a long time with a lot of community members who have been complaining about these issues and pushing for reforms and changes for years. Who in the community have you talked to, and what would be your approach as a council person to make sure that their voices are heeded in ways that they haven't been in years past? And Stephen, why don't you go first?
Sure. Well, I have a diverse campaign staff, and they are as passionate as I am about racial justice and police reform, and are very eager to see us win this election so that we can support the efforts that are currently underway on the city council. I am going to be a very proactive council member. I want to make sure that we have the right, like I said, a commission for police practices that reflects the community, that is charged with making those recommendations. And I will really value that input. I want a commission, I want an Office of Race and Equity that the people have confidence in. So I've been listening, reading, paying close attention to what people have had to say. Obviously, there is a mandate in our community to make changes. We've seen some changes already with the end of the use of the carotid restraint. Some de-escalation procedures have been put in place. We've seen a duty to intervene that has been put in place. None of those would have happened without the protests that we have seen and the many voices that are calling for reforms. And it's going to be important that there's not only my voice, but the entire community's voice calling for continued reforms if we're going to accomplish what we need to do.
And Toni, who have you been talking to, and how would you involve them when you were at council?
Thanks, Matt. I've been talking with members of the Black community, both the straight community and the LGBTQ community. I've been talking to members of the Latinx community. I've been talking to members of the transgender community. I've been talking to my unhoused neighbors when I'm walking in my own neighborhood to go to the farmer's market or go to the grocery store, to local restaurants. I talk to people every day on the phone that, like I said, I'm still working because this is a time where we need every public servant doing the jobs that they've been hired to do to connect folks to services. I talk to people every day about the legislation that we had at the state level to address these disparities. And I've talked to people who have been very upset about the bills that weren't able to get passed through because we ran out of time. We shouldn't be running out of time when it comes to talking about racial disparities. The fact that we still have the qualified immunity is still on the books is ridiculous. As I said, it makes people not trust the people that have been hired to keep us safe. So, with our on the ballot, we're going to have a choice to create a new commission, a community-based commission on police practices, talk about police accountability. And the folks that I want that to pass, I'm doing everything I can to make sure that passes. And when it does, the folks that are going to serve on that, they need to be extremely diverse in age, in lived experience, in gender, excuse me, in and looking at folks with disabilities as well. We need to have more folks at the table that have these lived experiences, that are appointed by their community. It shouldn't just be somebody in the mayor's office making these decisions. It shouldn't just be me or any of our 9 council members making these decisions. This needs to come from the community because the community is asking for it.
And then, given what you just said, do you support Chief Nislight as chief of the police department?
So I've met the chief, I've worked with the chief. What we need to see is he going to make change? Is he going to address these huge issues? And we go from there. Right now, we're seeing that there's a lot of folks that are calling for new leadership. So I'm not on council. I'm not in the mayor's office. I'm just a community member right now, but we have a lot of big questions to ask, and sitting down with the chief we need to demand some answers.
Stephen.
Well, the chief, as you know, reports to the mayor, so it's a little hard to ascertain whether the police department is a reflection of the chief himself or is a reflection of the mayor. I may get a closer look at that once I am on the city council, and in any event, we'll have a new mayor, one way or the other, who will presumably be providing his or her own direction on their vision for the police department and working with the chief. So what I'm focused on is what I can do. And what I can do is make sure that we get an independent commission on police practices that is set up properly, that will ensure the trust, hopefully, and respect of the community, and that will hold the police department accountable. And the same with the Office on Race and Equity. One of the most important things I could do is make sure out of the gate that we get those set up properly.
I appreciate that. I know you said it a couple times now. One of the things I appreciated you both doing for us was writing the essays you did on defending the police, which is defunding the police or defending the police, which is obviously a nuanced subject. But Stephen, I want to ask you particularly about one of the things you talked about, because you brought in the issue of the city's towing policy, called it an example of structural racism in the city. Let me ask you this about the police department, but about the city in general. Is the police department, is the city in general, is it a racist system?
Well, I mean, any system that has structural racism by definition is racist, and our city has structural racism, and therefore you have to say that the city is racist. And it is our job to root out that racism. I mentioned the towing policies. I have personally known at least 3 people, all of whom are people of color, all of whom were younger people, who have lost their cars due to the city's towing policies. What happens is, you've got people who, may not be able to afford to park their car in a fancy garage or what have you. They park on the street, and therefore they have more exposure to the city's parking restrictions. They're more likely to get tickets. If you get enough of those tickets because perhaps you don't make a lot of money and they're expensive. I mean, I got a ticket, it was $40. That's a lot of money. Those add up. And if you get 5 or 6 tickets, whatever it is, your car gets towed. It can get towed out to the lots out on the east side of the city. Well, that's hard to get to. And when you finally do get out there without a car, you've got to pay the towing fee. You've got to pay whatever fines it was that you owed in the first place. And you have to pay the storage costs, which escalate every day. No wonder, low-income people are losing their vehicles because they can never afford to get them back. We have to change that.
How would you change that? How would you change that?
Well, I think we need to have, first of all, limits on the amount that it would cost for somebody to have to get their car back. So that would be a limit on the storage fees. I think we need to allow people to pay over time in that kind of a situation. I mean, somebody shouldn't have to come up with $1,000 on the spot to get their car back. And if they can't, the costs go up every day, they should be able to get their car back at a reasonable price and pay that back off to the city over time. That's humane. And
Toni, the question to you on the city's the police department especially, but the city. Do you view it as a racist institution?
Systemic racism runs rampant not only in our city but in our entire country. I'm a Latina. A lot of my friends are people of color and lower income folks, and our lived experience shows us how if you don't have enough money, if you don't have enough income, if you don't have the right resources, if you don't have the right connections, that life for you is going to be a lot harder. We see that every day in our city. We see it in our elected offices. We see it in campaigns. You know, we have so many folks that don't feel that they can run for office to represent their own communities because they don't have that connection to the party, or they don't have that independent wealth, or they don't have a connection to folks that have money. You know, we live in a racist society, and it's a very uncomfortable conversation for a lot of people. And unfortunately, it has taken more people being killed during this pandemic, and more people being forced to see that and watch it, to realize that this is an issue that runs rampant. And
how would you change it to the extent that you can address it? How would you Stephen mentioned one issue and had some ideas in the towing policy. Is there a particular policy or part of city government that you would want to change, and how would you do it?
Yeah, we can start at boards and commissions. We can look at our community planning groups, our community associations. We have we have a huge lack of diversity in our decision-making process. We have a huge lack of people with lived experience that, you know, we are making policy issues without having folks at the table that have actually experienced any of these issues. And so we need to be more mindful of opening up that conversation, looking outside of ourselves and listening to folks that are telling us, you know, I am having a problem getting into housing. I am having a problem, you know, like Stephen was talking about with parking. I was helping a woman that lost her home. She was living in her car, waiting on her unemployment. She was also a transplant patient, so she couldn't get the medication that she needed because she didn't have a place to put it in a refrigerator. Ended up that she was running around just moving her car as much as possible to try to stay away from some of those people that were trying to repossess her car. We were trying everything we could to get her into a spot where she would not get towed and where she could sleep overnight. You know, the vehicle habitation policy that we have, that needs to be repealed. It's terrible enough that folks now are sleeping in their cars, but making it even harder for them to get back on their feet by towing them and then ticketing them further, that's, again, these are systemic issues, and they've been built in a way to make it so folks that aren't as privileged don't have resources.
A lot of people have suggested getting rid of pretext searches. Would you support such a thing? Pretext stops in general, ending them?
Absolutely, absolutely. There are people that fear driving because they fear that because of the color of their skin, they're going to be pulled over. I have close friends that I've had to sit with. I don't want to say I had to, but these are my friends that are being pulled over just because they're Black. Haven't done anything wrong. But the fact that there's an assumption, if I pull you over because of the color of your skin, I'm probably going to find something wrong. We shouldn't be trying to find something wrong. We should be finding ways to make it right.
Stephen, what do you think about pretext stops?
Well, what we need to get rid of are the racial disparities in pretext stops for sure. I mean, pretext stops by and large are, pulling folks over for minor traffic violations, which provides an opportunity to explore perhaps, other problems. I mean, there's some value in being able to pull someone over for a minor traffic violation in and of itself, if necessary, not to mention the investigatory, opportunity that it provides. So I don't know that we necessarily want to completely take that tool out of the toolkit, but it's got to be applied in an even way. So, one of the things that I think that we ought to look at is the data behind how many of these stops for, minor traffic violations are made in the various neighborhoods around San Diego. Let's look at District 1. How many, on average, historically, minor traffic stops have there been in this, predominantly Caucasian area on a monthly basis? How many have there been in District 4, which has a, largely people of color community? And maybe you limit the number of minor traffic stops that you can conduct in District 4 so that it's commensurate with the number that, historically have happened in District 1. And perhaps, at least that way you achieve some equity in the number of minor traffic stops that you're doing with various populations. I don't know if that's the answer, but I think that we can look at the data and find ways in which to make the application of minor traffic stops more equitable around the city, because obviously there's currently a problem.
Last summer, we met with Assemblywoman Weber, one of the real heroes of the local community, after she got the police use of force bill passed. And she could not have been more forceful in saying that it's time that Democrats had a reckoning about the power of police unions and teachers unions. And yet that doesn't seem to come up much in these debates. If you've got powerful government unions opposing changes sought by progressives, why aren't they confronted more directly?
Toni, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I appreciate that comment. I think a lot of elected officials are afraid to challenge the police officers union. I do not have their endorsement, and I don't see that as a, it's not all about endorsements, but I don't see that as a thing that's bad, because I don't want to be held accountable for a group that's endorsed me that says we'll endorse you if, we have folks that are supported by these unions that I feel that there's a lot of backroom deals that are made, and we're not going to have change. We're not going to make the change that we need until we stand up and we question them and we get the answers that we need. I'm not trying to say that they're all bad, but there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of deal making. There's a lot of strong arming sometimes, and that needs to be addressed, because it's not all about a group. This is about San Diegans we're talking about. This is about the residents in our city. This is about our friends and our family and our neighbors, and questions need to be asked, and we need to be bold enough and strong enough to do that, and not worry that if I say something, it means I'm not going to get elected, or if I say something, it means I'm not going to get reelected. Our job is to make sure that San Diegans are taken care of while we're in this position, and do everything we can to hold folks accountable that don't have the best interest of San Diegans at heart.
And Stephen, before you answer that, Toni, I want to ask you, did you seek the POA endorsement?
I chatted with them a little bit. I did not seek the endorsement. I want the endorsement of the people of District 3. That's where my focus is. Not backroom deals, not focusing on political insiders. I'm focusing on the people of the district.
What does chatted mean, if not seek the endorsement?
Oh, it was just, there were folks, a couple folks from the POA that I talked to, but I did not do a sit down conversation with them.
Okay. Stephen, how do you handle Chris's question?
Well, Chris, I mean, there is no doubt that unions have sometimes stood in the way of reforms, opposed reforms. I think that is true of just about any membership organization. You have many membership organizations that sometimes stand in the way of reforms because their role, their reason for existence is to represent the interests of their members. And sometimes the interests of a group's members don't align with the interests of the community. It is what it is. And my role as a council member is going to be to understand when that's the case and detect when that's the case. And if the interests of a membership organization, regardless of what it is, whether it's a union or something else, don't align with the interests of the community, my job, I'm there at the end of the day to represent the interests of the community. But let me say, I do support unions. I think unions have played an important role in establishing a middle class, in providing worker protections in terms of income, in terms of benefits, in terms of working conditions. So, count me as a supporter, a strong supporter of unions, and also an independent thinker.
I just want to ask a quick question because I'm curious to know why at the height of these protests that we had, where we're talking about Black Lives Matters and we're talking about racial disparities, we're talking about these huge issues. I'm curious why at the height of that, the POA endorsement was removed from Mr. Whitburn's website. And then once those conversations, once the UT editorials lessened a little bit, that endorsement was put back on the website.
Stephen,
I'll
do
be
you
glad
want
to answer that. Sure.
Yeah.
I am the endorsed, that the Police Officers Association has endorsed me at the very height of the protests and in the wake of the murder of George Floyd and the sensibilities at the time. People suggested to me that it might be a little insensitive to have that up there. So we took it down. And then over time, we felt like at the end of the day, we're endorsed, we're going to put it up. So it's up there now.
How long was it gone for?
A month, maybe.
And does that mean that you don't stand by the endorsement or aren't proud of the endorsement, or?
No, I am endorsed by the Police Officers Association. And like I said, we put it up. When the protests initially happened, there were some feelings that maybe having that up there was insensitive or not in line with what the community was feeling at the time. And so, we took it off, but we have since put it back up there. I stand, I'm endorsed. Look, I'm endorsed by every organization that has interviewed the candidates and made an endorsement in the race. Every single organization that has interviewed our candidates and made an endorsement in this race has endorsed me. And the Police Officers Association is among them.
Before we move on from policing and racial equity issues, I just want to make sure any other board members want to jump in on that issue before we move on.
Pride this year didn't welcome officers in uniform, and I'm wondering what each of you thinks of that decision.
Stephen, why don't you go first?
Well, I think it was a mistake. I think that, an organization such as San Diego Pride is an inclusive organization, or ought to be an inclusive organization, and ought to welcome all people who want to demonstrate their support for the LGBT community. There are many, many people who recall the days that no police force would walk in a pride parade. And many, many people who found it incredibly powerful and moving and supportive when the police department did march in the pride parade. It was a monumental moment for many people. And for the community to suddenly, in some ways, turn its back on the police department doesn't feel right to me. I think we need to acknowledge that there are you know, the police, there's all kinds of diversity within the police department, and there are all sorts of good people who are on the police force who would like to show their support for the LGBT community and for diverse populations, and we should welcome that.
Toni?
Yeah, so I know San Diego Pride and the LGBT Center both made announcements at the height of these protests that they were no longer going to have police officers in uniform within their space. And that was an answer to folks from the Black, Brown, and trans community that have protested themselves and have been asking and really screaming for help for several years because they did not feel safe around folks that had firearms. So it wasn't a matter of you're not welcome. It was a matter of please leave that gun and the uniform home. Come and show support, be in plain clothes, you know, show that you're a community person. But it was the uniform and the gun. That's what really made a lot of community members feel unsafe. And so just like we're asking for change and reform now, that was two large local nonprofit organizations answering to their community.
I'm wondering, Toni, what, you know, assuming that Pride happens next year, hopefully, we know we're not all working from home and all the rest of it at that time. What would you suggest to folks at the center or Pride? Would you, and personally, would you support having officers in uniform next year or not?
I know San Diego Pride put a plan out that they put together with the Black LGBTQ Coalition, asking for changes and asking for reform. And I know there have been some changes already. And like I said, this is a matter of we need to be talking to our community that has asked that we please do this. We're answering to our community. And so next year, who knows what's going to happen? We've seen that there's been a lot of change in just a matter of 6 months. And so I think if we have great change, like what we're asking for, you know, that's going to be reflective in how our community feels about officers in uniform.
And Laura, did you have a question?
Yes, I have a question and a clarification for each of you. If you could just keep your answer really, really brief. Toni, you mentioned backroom deals. Are you aware of any that you can cite to us that you know of, or is that just a hunch that you have? And for Stephen, you said that you took this, you know, that you removed the POA from your website. Were there any other organizations that have ever been removed from your website for a period of time? So just
No.
quick questions. No, that was the only one?
No.
Thank you. And Toni?
So the backroom deals is what community members have talked about. I have not been in them, so I can't actually say what they are.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's move over to a huge issue in the district, and in the city and in the region, Balboa Park. $300 million worth of refurbishments needed, fewer visitors now, but that will change. In the primary, Stephen, you had talked about a bond. Do you still support that? And is that a high priority given the economy and where we're at now? Has your position on that changed?
I don't think that this is the right timing for a bond at this point. I actually have been very interested in the transit plan that has come from Sandag. And one of the things that transit plan wants to do is add a trolley that would go around the circumference of Balboa Park. It would add a rail line through the area. It would really make transit more robust in the Balboa Park area. Now, one of Sandag's missions is to increase ridership of transit. So Sandag, it would seem to me, with that $177 billion, might have a stake in ensuring that Balboa Park is a place where people want to go. So when I'm on the Sandag board, I would like to explore whether Sandag might be willing to kick in some money so that people want to take transit to Balboa Park.
And Toni, to you, when we asked this question, if you supported a bond, you said, and I'll read it, I wouldn't say that I oppose it. Where are you now? Do you have a firmer stance on the issue of that in this economy?
Right now, our residents feel overtaxed, and our answer to funding can't always be just tax our residents even more than they already are. There's definitely a time and a place, and we need to be looking at other ways to bring money in to address this deferred maintenance. Penny for the Arts was a program, and with I believe with Mayor Sanders many years ago, where a penny from I just lost my thought. But from tourism would come in, and it would go towards addressing our arts and culture. It would go to addressing our deferred maintenance. You know, about a year or so ago, we were able to, because the community, this was a conversation the community had with us and stakeholders, we were able to add into the state budget millions of dollars to address some of this deferred maintenance in Balboa Park. Now, with our city and with our state, both in a huge deficit, we may not be able to do that for a little bit, but these are definitely questions that we need to ask moving forward. We need to advocate more to get funding from the federal government and from the state. It will be available again, and it's up to us to make sure that we're asking for it, we're advocating for it. Make sure that we do get that penny for the arts. Work together to increase philanthropy to address these issues within our arts and culture organizations. But you know, this has been an issue within our city for decades. You know, we keep pushing it off for the next person, pushing it off for the next council member, for the next mayor, and we can't keep pushing it off, because we've seen that when we do that, it gets to a point where it's almost not fixable anymore. So definitely finding better ways to address deferred maintenance, get that money in, and start working on it, because you know, this is a place where tourists love to go. This is where San Diegans love to go. We have to take care of it.
There is a bond measure on the ballot in November, the $900 million housing budget. Just really quickly, do you support that, Stephen?
I do.
And Toni?
Yes, I've been vocally supporting it, publicly supporting it for a long time now.
Okay. And then two other measures I just want to ask about really quickly on the ballot. I think, Stephen, you mentioned this, the police commission. You support that? And Toni, you support that?
Yes, I've endorsed it.
Okay.
Yep.
And lastly, the height limit, the 30-foot height limit. What is your position on that? And Toni, why don't you go first?
Are we talking about Midway
Correct.
District?
Yep.
Yes.
Measure E.
Yeah.
You're a yes.
Yes.
Stephen, are you a yes?
I support it.
Yes or no, Stephen?
Well, I'll say yes, but can I elaborate a little bit?
Sure, please.
I support it, but I also think it's a missed opportunity. I support it because I think that increasing the height limit there and the rejuvenation that it will provide to the area is better than what we have there now. But I think that it's a missed opportunity because I don't think that we've explored what public benefits we can get in return. I think that with the height limit, we'll be able to add much needed housing. We'll be able to revitalize what is currently a blighted area. I think that it's far enough inland that it doesn't present height concerns. I mean, the sports arena is 70 feet plus right now, and I don't hear too many people complaining about the height of the sports arena. There's no views really at stake. So, I understand the concerns of people who fear that it would be a slippery slope to eliminating the height limit closer to the coast. And I am absolutely opposed to doing that and would fight that. But I think in this case, it would improve the situation over what we have now. However, I think it's a missed opportunity because, I think that we could have possibly gotten more public benefit for the change that we're going to make. I mean, think about it. You know, if we build housing that goes, I don't know how many, 7 stories high, the views are going to be extraordinary. I mean, you have Mission Bay to the north, you have San Diego Bay to the south, you've got the Pacific Ocean to the west, you've got, you know, mountains to the east. You know, luxury housing is going to fetch a pretty penny right there. So, you know, what could we have gotten in terms of an affordable housing commitment? What could we have gotten for, you know, a public space commitment? I would have liked to at least have heard more about that.
And let me ask you about the sports arena redevelopment now, which is obviously a huge issue that the new council will deal with. Stephen, you're talking about this almost in the past tense, and this is one of the things that we've been talking about is, you know, the mayor is forging ahead with a developer on a plan when he's almost out of office, and a new council and new mayor will take in. Are you supportive of the sports arena plan? Do you want to put the brakes on the sports arena plan if you could? Like, what are your thoughts on this massive redevelopment proposal?
Well, so to be clear, you know, in what I was talking about, I was talking more broadly about the Midway area, which, as you know, extends, you know, beyond the actual sports arena property that we're talking about this particular redevelopment occurring on. So my comments have to do with the, you know, the broad Midway area and the opportunity and the property value increases that will occur there. In terms of the actual property real estate transaction and redevelopment, I'd really like for it to wait until I get there, because I want to make sure we're asking the right questions. We don't have a history of asking the right questions when it comes to real estate transactions. I am fully prepared to ask a lot of questions and make sure it's a good deal for the city. So it wouldn't surprise me if, you know, the next city council is ultimately the city council that approves it anyway, but I hope that it will be.
Toni, your thoughts on sports arena?
Yeah, so this is a project that not only involves the mayor's office, but the Midway Planning Group, they actually had a big say in it as well, working with their Councilmember Jen Campbell's office as well. Yes, we all have questions, especially after, you know, talking about everything that's going on with 101 Ash Street and whether or not the real estate department should be making plans for us for the future. But I think also because we are facing those questions, we are facing those big issues, I believe that transparency will play a bigger role, especially in this sports arena project. So I know the mayor has already made a decision on who he wants to move forward with his plan. Whether or not they move forward with it before he leaves office or after, this is something that the next council members and the next mayor's office will be dealing with and looking at. So
I'm curious how both of you do ensure transparency. Like, this came up in an earlier interview where, you know, candidates say this all the time, and yet there's a long list of failures at City Hall where people didn't ask questions or people didn't get the right information. I mean, how every candidate says that. How do you ensure that? How should a voter looking to choose between the two of you judge your approach to that? And Stephen, why don't you go first?
Well, I have a plan, and so I hope they judge me by my plan. There is going to be far more information that comes out in the coming weeks about specifically what happened with 101 Ash. And, you know, we'll have to evaluate that information. But I have seen enough to know that we do not have the appropriate checks and balances on the administration and the Department of Real Estate Assets. We've seen it with 101 Ash. We saw it with the, you know, Homeless Navigation Center. We've seen it in the past. We need, I mean, look at some of the things that didn't happen. We didn't get an independent inspection of the property. We, you know, had a lease written that, you know, puts the taxpayers at risk for the whole thing. We, you know, had a situation where the staff was telling the city council that it was a Class A building, when in fact it said right in the appraisal that it was a Class B building. So we need to establish greater checks and balances. I would like to explore what role the Office of the Independent Budget Analyst can have in analyzing real estate transactions before they come to the City Council. The Independent Budget Analyst, as we know, assesses the mayor's budget proposal and provides recommendations and suggestions to the City Council. But the IBA also does quite a bit of policy analysis on measures that are coming before the City Council and makes recommendations and compares what's happened elsewhere and reviews documents and such. And in fact, in 2016, the Independent Budget Analyst did an analysis of the financing mechanisms for 101 Ash Street and sort of walked the council through in a report the various possible mechanisms and had some suggestions for the council to explore. But one thing the IBA doesn't do right now is examine the real estate transactions themselves. And I would like the IBA to do that. And it may be as simple as hiring someone who has deep real estate transaction expertise, who knows what to look for in a real estate transaction, who would obviously have a checklist that would, ask, have we done an independent inspection on this property? If not, why not? How does this lease look? It says right here in your staff report to the council that it's a Class A building, but it says in the appraisal that it's a Class B. I think that if we have that there, we can prevent a lot of these things from happening. And let me tell you, we have another big property transaction coming up. As you know, the city is looking to purchase 2 motels to house people who are homeless. And there's a $120 million ticket on that. That's going to cost $120 million. And it is a combination of state money and city money and housing commission money. Look, I think it's a great idea. I think it's really smart to use state money in part to buy motels to house people who are homeless. I want to see that work. But I'd also like to make sure that we've done an inspection of the properties. I want to make sure that I've seen the appraisal. I want to make sure that we know exactly what we're going to use those buildings for. If I were on the council now, I'd be asking the independent budget analyst to analyze that potential transaction, or I'd be there asking a lot of questions myself.
Toni, how would voters know to trust you?
Honesty, transparency, and communication are key, not just in my campaign, but for myself. I know what it's like to feel like you're not getting all the information. I know what it's like to sit in these community meetings throughout the district and find out that night that something had been planned for months or even for years. And it's important that as a council member, that you're not just there representing the residents of your district, but you're also making sure that they're aware of what the processes are, that they're aware of changes you're looking at making to their neighborhood, keeping communication open between you, your office, and those individuals, those community groups, those neighborhoods. One of the things that I talked about last year was creating neighborhood leadership groups, where it's not just your standard, I was elected to a planning group or I was elected to a community organization. These are regular folks that haven't been able to attend their meetings, these community meetings. We're seeing that through this pandemic, there are more options and better options and other ways to connect with folks, whether it be virtual, whether it be sending them information in the mail. But it's key that we're keeping that line of communication open, making sure that they understand what the budget process is. We saw during the budget process recently, we listened to hundreds of folks calling in that didn't understand the process and didn't know that basically decisions were already made because we have a strong mayor form of government and council members felt like their hands were tied because that communication is not there and we're not explaining to our constituents how this process works. That angers our community. So we need to keep that line of communication open, be educational in how city government works, bring more folks to the table. I love that that city council now has regular updates that they send out to let people know, here's what's coming up at City Council. Here's what's happening in the city. Here's how you can be a part of the process. You know, these are things that should have been around long ago. I appreciate that they're here now, and we just need to expand off of them.
2016 and 2017, the city of San Diego and San Diego County made some astounding mistakes. It was Ash Street, it was the surveillance cameras. But the one that gets me is in 2017, we have a hepatitis epidemic, and the county does not declare an emergency until the last day of August, a month after there have already been hundreds of cases. Now, everybody likes to blame Faulkner for these things. Well, why couldn't the council member have been more diligent on Ash Street? Why couldn't the council member have been more diligent about the surveillance cameras? And why couldn't the councilman have spoken up, you know, like July 15th after we had our 10th death and said, hey, county, this is an emergency. So I understand why people like to bash Faulkner. We do it in our editorial pages. But it seems to me like the collective blame for some of the terrible decisions out there should be spread much wider.
We need to be more collaborative. You know, we look at the last 6 months when we have regular updates from the county that we see on television. They were every day. Now they're a few days a week. But here we're all San Diego, but we had a state update, then we had a county update, and then we had a city update. And so people get confused as to who's making these decisions. So the city and the county need to be working together and doing it better. You know, it's not us versus them. It's not finger pointing. It's up to all of us to make sure that we're taking care of our residents. And so we absolutely need to have better relationships and come together. We're all going to be elected officials. We're all going to be public servants. And this isn't about ego. This isn't about what I can do and what you can't do. This is about making sure that people are safe in our communities and are taken care of, and that people know where they need to go to get answers. So better accountability between us and our communities, but also between us and other elected officials. You know, it's our duty to do that.
Stephen, you want to weigh in?
Sure. You know, we're supposed to have a strong mayor, strong council form of government. I think we oftentimes in practice have a strong mayor, not so strong council. And I want to change that. I want the council to be a strong, assertive legislative body that works well with the executive branch, but that takes its own responsibility for the welfare of the city and its residents. And I think that part and parcel to that is my proposal to have the independent budget analyst independently assess proposals that are coming from the executive branch and provide advice to the city council so that we're making a wise decision. I will certainly be one to ask questions myself. As regards the hepatitis outbreak with the county of San Diego, I mean, that was a travesty. I think that our current county supervisor, Nathan Fletcher, who represents this area, has done a solid job in encouraging the county to start stepping up to the plate when it comes to health and social services. And it's going to take a real partnership between the county and the city to make sure that things like that don't happen again, because the county is largely responsible for the health services. The city is largely responsible for the housing. That comes together when it comes to homelessness and homelessness issues, whether it's housing, whether it's healthcare, what have you. There has to be a partnership between the two. Supervisor Fletcher and I have a very good relationship. He has endorsed me. He has said that I am the partner he needs at City Hall, and we're going to work together to solve homelessness.
On the homelessness issue, the convention center is generally regarded as a success. A lot of people going through there. I think about half of them are housed, a lot of them getting services, but it's also a convention center that when this is all over is going to be used for conventions. So what is your future vision for homelessness? And if not, when should the convention center close, I guess is the first question. And where should the city house its unsheltered after that? Back in bridge shelters or somewhere else? And Toni, why don't you go first?
Yeah, thank you. We saw again that when we're in a state of emergency, we're able to make quick decisions to help folks and help their quality of life. The fact that it took this pandemic to do that, you know, we were already in a crisis. We were already having way too many folks living on the streets and living in their cars. So while I applaud that these quick decisions were made to place people in housing in the convention center where they could get services that they need and get connected to housing options. You know, the mayor came out and said something like 525 of those people are now in housing. And so we've seen that we can do it if we're really pressed to. So the fact that, you know, we have this plan that was brought before City Council. It was a 10-year blueprint on how to address homelessness in San Diego. There's a lot of funding questions around that, but the fact that Project Room Key, which was through the state, where we were getting folks off the streets and into hotel rooms that were at higher risk of contracting COVID-19, the fact that Project Room Key turned into Project Home Key, turning these old hotels and motels and other buildings into housing for folks. You know, that's exactly one of the things that we need to do. It's innovative. You know, we're using existing spaces where people have been housed before, where they have been. You know, we can look at, it's called Zephyr in Mission Valley. It used to be an old Motel 6, and it was turned into permanent housing for veterans that were experiencing homelessness. On the same space where it used to be the old Denny's, that turned into where they could get their wraparound services. Where the pool was is where folks could go and be part of the community garden and grow their own food. And there was space where if somebody was in a wheelchair, they could get through and they could still participate. You know, we've seen that these options work, and that's just one way to address our homelessness crisis. We need to, yes, open back up the Golden Hall, and as an interim, we need to keep the convention center available as long as possible until we do have folks housed. We need to look at the emergency housing, permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing. You know, it's not a one-size-fits-all when we're talking about addressing our homelessness crisis. So we are on the way. We are finally making change that we can see, and we just need to keep it up.
And Stephen, how about you on housing in terms of the convention center and what's next?
Sure. One of the things that the city of San Diego has lacked when it comes to homelessness for many years is a real coordination of services. And fortuitously, what the convention center shelter has brought forth is a pretty robust coordination of services. And because of that, several hundred people have been transferred from the short-term homeless shelter into longer-term housing. So first of all, we need to continue that robust coordination of services. I think that's essential. I think we need to take what we've learned from this experience and continue it because it's working. I think that we should continue what we've got going there for as long as possible. I understand that the mayor is talking about ending that convention center shelter by the end of the year. I'm not quite sure what the rationale for that is. It doesn't seem to me as though we're going to have conventions in the convention center for quite a while now. And it wouldn't seem to me like it would take that long to turn around the convention center homeless shelter to make it available to other groups. I'm not there, I don't know, but I would be inclined to leave it open for as long as is practical. But at some point it will close. And, short term, I think what we'll need to do then is take advantage, well, hopefully between now and then, we'll get more of the folks who are currently in the convention center housed through the coordination of services that we have. But beyond that, for the people who are remaining there, the Alpha Project still has 2 shelters that will be able to house a couple hundred people. The Golden Hall is able to house people as well. So I think that we'll be able to create a situation where everybody who is remaining in the convention center will be housed in some way. Under my watch, under no circumstances are we going to send people in the convention center just back out onto the street. I won't let that happen. Longer term, I think that we need to ensure that, we're making wise decisions about the acquisition of hotels using state money and some city money. I think that that is a good option for housing people who are homeless. But there's also some innovative options that I think have real potential. And one of them is using refurbished shipping containers. I mean, I think that is a fairly low cost and sensible way to create inexpensive housing that can house a lot of people. And in fact, there are many churches in San Diego County who are very interested in this. And there's a program underway to take advantage of this. You've got a lot of churches that have more land than they need. They have excess land. And by creating small container communities that will house people who are homeless or in need of affordable housing. It matches their social justice mission of the churches. It could provide a source of revenue to the churches. It's property tax exempt because it's church property. I mean, there's all sorts of advantages in pursuing that. And I think that we should really explore and take advantage of that possibility.
Let me open it up to board members on housing and homelessness. Anyone have a specific question they want to ask the candidates? I know Chris is probably happy you said shipping containers.
We did shipping containers. I'm curious what you both think about the state of the city's planning committees and commissions and boards. If they have enough say in decisions in their own communities, I often get complaints from readers that our planning commission didn't like this or that project. It went to the city council and got pushed right through. So do they have enough say? Do they need some addressing to make them more viable?
Stephen, why don't you go first?
Sure. I served on the North Park Planning Committee for 4 years. I was the vice chair. I'm very familiar with the planning committees, and I think that they provide a very valuable advisory role to the city council. The planning committees are elected by members of the community. Typically anybody who's gone to, one or more meetings, it depends on the committee, is eligible to vote. And, candidates will often work hard to rally, the people they know to come vote. So you can get a committee that is more or less representative of the community at large. And you have to recognize when a planning committee is skewed one way or the other. But with that understanding, the planning committees are sort of a first line of inquiry on development proposals and other things that are going to be going to the council. And you would hope that they're asking questions and giving the community the opportunity to come and weigh in. So, I think what the planning committees provide is a real opportunity, not only for planning committee input, but for public input. And I think it's, incumbent on a city council member to be paying close attention to what is happening at those planning committee meetings. I mean, I enjoyed that stuff. I will go to some of those planning committees and really hear what the public has to say, hear what the planning committee has to say. I may or may not always agree with the perspective that the planning committee ultimately has, but at least I will know the issues that were discussed in an open and transparent fashion.
Toni?
So I have been going to these meetings in District 3 for the last 7 years. I've seen how we oftentimes have a lack of diversity on our boards. I've seen how recently, over the past couple of years, we have folks that want to have more say. They want to allow for more growth and more building and more options within their neighborhoods. So they gather and they form these Rise Up groups to get younger folks and people of color and renters on these planning groups, because we have seen that there are a lot of times where the greater community, the greater members of the neighborhoods don't know that these groups exist. So they don't know that they have the option to go to meetings. They don't know how to engage. And so that's part of the reason why it's so important as a council member that you engage the groups more. You get that information out into the neighborhoods about, here's a decision-making group that's in your neighborhood. Through the pandemic, we've seen that because these meetings have been opened up via Zoom, that we're having more people engaged because now they can attend. They can watch from home and give their input from home while they're making dinner, while they're watching their kids, while they're helping with homework, while they're taking care of an elderly parent or grandparent in their home. And unfortunately, there are some groups that have been a little more, let's say that they're not open to approving some things that we need. They're not open to approving more housing being built. They're not open to updating community plan updates to address, building more units. And that unfortunately has made it so the state of California starts making the decision, well, if you're not going to do it, if you're not going to make these decisions, we're going to make the decision for you. And we have seen that sometimes that works, but one bill passed into law, written by somebody in one area of California, that doesn't always reflect what another community in another part of California needs. So we need to have more folks on these planning groups with a more open mind and helping to push through some of these ideas, so we don't have the state coming in and trying to make decisions for us.
Let's stay on the subject because it kind of goes to the heart of what we were talking about earlier with racial equity and involvement of people in government. So there's a lot of stories recently about how these groups are largely male, largely older, largely homeowners. That's clearly one worldview. How do you as a council member get more diversity on these panels? Like, you kind of got into it a little bit, Toni, but like specifically, what would you do to get more diversity in those groups? And Toni first, and then you, Stephen.
Yeah, definitely more outreach. I'm a queer Latina. I am oftentimes the only woman in a room. When we're talking about people that are making decisions, I'm oftentimes the only person of color in a room. When people are making decisions for their neighborhoods, for their communities, for their city. And so, I will be sure to push for more transparency, more openness, more diversity, more equity in this decision-making process. I will be sure to push out information and invite people in and get more folks involved. I already have relationships, not just with these groups and not just with folks that are able to attend, but people outside of that, people that are working more than a 40-hour Monday through Friday 9-to-5 job. We have so many other types of folks living in our district. We have a lot of lower income folks. I mean, right now, it came out that was it like $97,000 is median income in San Diego, and if you're making $64,000 or less, you're considered low income. I make less than that. When I worked in the mayor's office, I only made $30,000 a year. And that's not unusual for folks that live in the district. That's not unusual for folks that want to be able to help make decisions and share their lived experience and let people know this is what I need. So it's important that we're talking about, asking for what we want, but also demanding what we deserve and demanding what we need. And what we need is a more equitable process in this planning.
And Stephen, how about you? How would you ensure kind of wider representation?
Sure. These bodies are elected by the community. So, at the end of the day, it's who runs and who gets elected by, the community members. There's a couple of different possibilities. I mean, these planning committees oftentimes have requirements where a certain number of members must be homeowners, a certain number must be renters, and what have you. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that you could incorporate some sort of a diversity requirement in the makeup of these planning committees. I think that's a possibility. But I also think that one of the problems is that these bodies are largely unknown to the general population. If you are really into community planning, or there's a big issue in your neighborhood, and you're just kind of wonky about those things, you're familiar with your planning committees. But I think if you ask, most people, about their planning committee, they won't really be able to say much about it. There's interest in city council races. There's interest in, some of these more visible positions because they get attention. So I think that as a council member, one of my roles is going to be to bring attention to the planning committees, to actively recruit people to serve on a planning committee. That's within my rights. So I think that if I exercise my ability to try to proactively encourage diverse people to run, call attention to them so more people are organically interested, we could start to make progress on that.
And we're kind of getting to the end of the line here. I know a couple other issues I want to get in, and then I want to give the board a chance to talk before you guys get your closing statements. The biggest issue remains climate change for many, for good reason. We're seeing it affecting California with the fires up and down the state. The Climate Action Plan has a lot of provisions in there in terms of mobility and a lot of other things. I mean, I don't want to go into chapter verse on it, but some of those marks, may be difficult to hit. I'm just curious what your approach is to revisiting that. And again, keep these answers brief on a super complicated subject, if you could. Stephen, why don't you go first?
Sure, I'll keep it brief. The city of San Diego has a robust, highly regarded climate action plan, one that we could be proud of. However, we have fallen behind in achieving its goals. The independent budget analyst has taken a look at the problem, and the independent budget analyst has identified that one of the issues is that the city council has been looking at the climate action plan budget in a one-year time horizon. And with so many other things going on, it might make it a little bit easier for the city council to shave some money off what might otherwise be fully budgeted for the climate action plan. So the independent budget analyst has recommended that the city council look at the climate action plan budget in a 5-year time horizon, so that at every step of the way, the city council could see that if you don't fully fund it in year 1, you're going to have cumulative problems in years 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I strongly support that, and I will absolutely fully fund vote to fully fund the climate action plan.
Toni?
So we have the climate plan, and now we need the action. And absolutely, we a lot of times are our own worst enemies. We have these plans put forward, but then we don't do anything to address it. So absolutely, I will support fully funding our plan so we can take the action, making sure that we're really reducing our reliance on cars, incorporating more green transportation, more electric options. This is going to help address our air quality. We've seen that our air quality until the fires came back. We saw that during the pandemic, our air quality in San Diego actually got better because we had less cars on the roads. We saw that more folks were riding their bikes because they felt safer out there. And we need to have these options so people could ride their bikes more safely. So they could have other options out there if they want to have like scooters, whatever it is that we're talking about. We need to have incentives for increasing use of these other transit options as well, and also looking at not just in our city, but maybe starting even at city council, making options so people can work from home more often, to help reduce vehicle miles traveled, to help get our air quality better, to help address these issues that we have. So
I'm curious, the 12 communities in your district to get around a lot may require a car. Do you both have cars, and do you use cars quite a bit, or do you not have cars and not use them? Where are you on the spectrum? Toni.
So I have a car. I have reliance on it because of the work that I do. I also represent the cities of Del Mar, Solana Beach, and Coronado, and getting to those areas in a quick amount of time to make it to meetings. Sometimes public transit isn't the option. And the thing is, if we make our transit options better, that could be an option. I want to have those options to get out of my car. I loved it when I was able to ride the bus to work, because all I had to do was go to work and back. You know, it's definitely more relaxing, but more people want these options, and we just have to make sure that we build it. You know, shucks, we're gonna go back to if we build it, they will come. And so it's our responsibility to give people these options to help address our climate needs.
Stephen, what's your car status?
I have a car. I live downtown. I live 1 block from the trolley, but the trolley doesn't go anywhere else in District 3 other than Old Town, which is lovely, but I don't always have that much cause to go to Old Town. So to get to other parts of District 3, whether it's Mission Hills or Hillcrest or North Park or University Heights or Normal Heights or Golden Hill or South Park, you know, I need a car unless I want to take the bus. And as we know, the bus isn't always the most efficient means of travel. So I have a car because I need one.
When was the last time either you were on public transit, either the trolley or the bus? Stephen, why don't you go first?
Last time that I was on the trolley, well, so MTS has game day service. And I was living in North Park at the time. And so I talk about convoluted. I drove to Mission Valley so that I could get on the trolley to take me to Petco Park so that I could, you know, avoid the parking hassle. So, yeah, it shouldn't be that convoluted. What I will say is that that's not most people's experience with the trolley. Most people who use the trolley depend on the trolley to get from their homes to work. And, you know, whereas for me, it might be a minor inconvenience, for many people, it makes a real difference in how much time they have to spend with their families and their efficiency in getting from home to work. So, you know, we really have to improve our public transit system for the people who very much rely on it.
Toni, how about you? When was the last time you were on the trolley or the bus?
I used to ride the bus regularly to go to work and back. I haven't lived near a trolley, so I haven't had the option to use it. I want to use it, but I also try to use other options as well. If I'm downtown and I want to get around, I'll use Fred. It's a great little vehicle where you're sharing an electric vehicle with somebody else. I use car share programs, but I want to be able to use more transit. I want to help build it so I can be one of those people to use it.
Let me open it up to the board for other questions in the interest of time. Just want to see what do you all's, any last minute questions here?
Yes,
I have one. Oh, go ahead,
go
Laura.
ahead, Betsy. Go ahead.
What do you think the city should do to get the economy back on track after the pandemic?
Toni, why don't you start?
So we have seen that we at the city level, even though we have the state either making mandates or making suggestions and then the county implementing that, we've seen that at the city level, we opened up the convention center for the shelter. We suspended some of the parking enforcement, so people didn't have to pay for parking or worry about street sweeping or anything like that. We made sure that there was an eviction moratorium throughout the city. We had a rental assistance program. We had our permitting process changed so small businesses could stay open and expand out into the sidewalks, into the streets. We have so many things that, you know, we were innovative and listening to our community about what they needed and what we could do as a city to expedite that process. These are all things that we can continue because when we're supporting our small business, we're also supporting our workers. We're also supporting to ensure that they have income as well. We're supporting our own communities. We're helping folks. So we're in a global pandemic, and it's a terrible time for a lot of folks. but we're also stepping up finally to really address these issues right away. And these are all things that we can continue to help support businesses, property owners, renters, and our unsheltered residents long term.
Stephen?
Well, I think there are things that we can do short term, medium term, and long term. Short term, I think that we need to continue to take advantage of creative solutions for getting businesses to be able to operate outdoors in a safe way. I think that the city has been right, and I'd like to see that expanded. I also think that we need to really start promoting tourism and try to get folks from other parts of the Southwest in particular to come visit us in San Diego, because that outside money is a quick way to provide a financial shot in the arm to our city. So that's short term. Medium term, I would like to see us really push construction. One of the problems that we have is, the permitting process at the city tends to be slow. We hear about that all the time, and it's true. I'd like us to see if we need to hire another staff person or what have you to get some of this permitting done, so that, projects that, have largely been approved but are awaiting permits can get started, because construction is a good way to get money into the economy. I'd also, with all due respect to the Bay Area, like to continue to encourage those high-tech folks who are living up there to resettle down in San Diego. There was a story that I forget where I read it, not too long ago, where it was a couple. They had been up in the Bay Area. They were in high tech. They were working from home because of the pandemic, and it was a situation that was going to continue. And so they decided that home would be San Diego, where housing is cheaper and where the weather is better. Well, I think that might be appealing to a lot of people. So let's get some of those big, high-paying, high-tech jobs down here to San Diego. That's a medium-term thing that we can do. Longer term, I really want to promote high tech and life sciences, particularly downtown. At Horton Plaza, that's converting to a tech hub. The Pacific Gateway project is going to turn probably about 2/3 into a life sciences cluster. There's been some other interest in opening life sciences related office space. And those are typically high paying jobs, and I'd like to get more of them downtown. I mean, look at what we have to offer downtown. You could walk 20 minutes from the Bay to Balboa Park. We have arts and culture. We have housing. We have, transit. We have nightlife. Who wouldn't want to relocate their high-paying jobs to downtown San Diego?
Thanks, Stephen. And that was a Phil Molnar story that you read in the San Diego Union-Tribune. Laura, you had a question.
Yes, hoping that each of you can answer this in 2 sentences because we're out of time. But there's a vast growing Latino population here. It's already pretty large. What would both of you do to make the lives of Latinos here better?
Toni?
I am a Latina myself. We've also seen that disproportionately this pandemic, this COVID-19 crisis has affected our Latino community. We need to ensure that we are bringing more attention to that, supporting our Latino communities with healthcare, and also addressing the fact that the quality of life, especially air quality and our climate, affects our Latino communities disproportionately as well. And we just need a bigger and better focus on that, because honestly, we're tired of being pushed aside and neglected.
Stephen?
Well, there's been a lot of attention to systemic racism as it manifests itself with the Black community, but there is a tremendous amount of systemic racism that has, held back many people in the Latino community. And so, certainly as we are rooting out systemic racism in the city, we need to be looking at all communities. I would like to see us work with the federal government to improve the situation at the border. People, there are many people who live in Tijuana who, work in San Diego and spend a ridiculous amount of time crossing the border. We need to address that, and I'll be a strong advocate for that. Y también hablo español y puedo comunicar directamente con la gente y entender y escuchar lo que necesitan.
Gracias. Thank you both.
Toni, are you a Spanish speaker?
I grew up in the Midwest, and so all of my Mexican family did everything they could to help me learn. I know very little. I can ask you where the library is and ask you for another beer. But I still definitely have ways to communicate with my own culture.
Sure. Thank you. Any other questions by the board before we go to closing statements?
I had one really quick one, since we're talking about downtown and who wouldn't want to live downtown. We're getting a lot of letters during the pandemic that downtown is struggling because there aren't as many people working downtown. The homeless population is really kind of making it challenging to get from A to B down there. So I'm wondering, what kind of resources can we direct to rescuing the city's urban core?
We definitely need more mixed-use development in downtown. Use a lot of these buildings that are already there. Look at the zoning again. Have a more mix between business districts and residential districts. Downtown is an area where we can do that. We've seen that when we're closing off certain streets as well, that it revitalizes that area. So these are additional things that we can do, and then also, inviting in those tech giants. We have Horton Plaza, where we've been talking for a couple of years now about the tech community coming into that area. It's looking like it's going to happen now, and the fact that we have an increased number of folks experiencing homelessness in the downtown area as well. It goes to show you that we need to have services throughout every neighborhood, every area of the city, and not just focus on downtown. We need to have services available to folks where they are, and not try to push them all to one area.
Stephen?
Well, I live downtown, as I mentioned, and so I see the tragedy of homelessness every day, everywhere I look. I see the tragedy of closed storefronts every day, everywhere I look. We have to address those. We have to address those quickly. And that is why I have given so much thought to a homelessness plan, whereby we get, those folks who are currently in the convention center housed, where, we add more motel rooms so that we can get more people who are currently on the streets in there. And why we need to increase tourism, and why we need to increase creative ways to get our small businesses up and running in a safe manner. I think if we really focus on those things, we can start to turn this around. And then, of course, medium and long term, there's lots of things that we can do, as I discussed earlier, to really boost the economy for downtown and citywide.
Excellent. Thank you for that question and those answers. Let's go to closing statements. And Stephen, why don't you go first and keep them to about 2 minutes?
Sure. Well, thank you very much to the editorial board for your time this afternoon, and thank you for your time and effort that you put into this process. I know that it's a lot. Thank you as well for your endorsement in the primary. It was very much appreciated, and it was very helpful. I won the primary by 8.5 points, and I very much hope that I can earn your support again for the general election. Thousands of San Diegans are in crisis. They're in crisis with the COVID-19 health pandemic. They're in crisis because of the business closures due to the pandemic. We've got the growing threat of wildfires. We have the ongoing crises that we just talked about of homelessness, housing affordability, not to mention climate change and the condition of our streets and sidewalks. If there were ever a time when we need someone on the city council who is experienced and has proven leadership, now is the time. I'm the candidate who has run an organization, who has led a staff, who has balanced an organizational budget. I was the regional director for the American Cancer Society and the American Red Cross, and I was the executive director of San Diego Pride. I'm the candidate who has served on multiple boards of directors and city committees, ranging from the San Diego Human Dignity Foundation to the City of San Diego's Medical Marijuana Task Force 10 years ago, to the North Park Planning Committee, as I mentioned earlier. In addition to my degree from the University of Wisconsin, I earned a leadership certificate from the Rady School of Management at UC San Diego. We have tremendous challenges in front of us. I have a background that will enable me to be effective on day one. As I mentioned earlier, I am honored that every organization that has interviewed the candidates and made an endorsement in this race has endorsed my campaign. And there's none more important than the Union-Tribune editorial board. And I would be very honored to have your support, and I respectfully ask you for your endorsement. Thank you.
Thanks. Toni?
Thank you. It's so great to see you all again. I know it was about a year ago that we first had our interviews. So Matt, good to see you again. I know that sorry that Jeff was on a little bit ago. Sorry to miss him. Steve, and of course Chris. Chris, I still need to go get that fried chicken. Andrew, good to see you. And then I especially want to say welcome to Laura, Christy, and Abby. It's so great to see new faces and really see the diversity and the equity that we keep talking about. And so, you know, for the last 7 years, I've worked in the state office under Senator Toni Atkins, both in the Assembly and the Senate office. I've been working throughout this pandemic, connecting residents to the resources that they need to ensure that they're getting the unemployment that they've been waiting for, to connect them to the resources to help get food on the table, to ensure that they know that they're not going to be facing homelessness, they're not going to be facing eviction. We've seen that in order to restart our economy and address climate change and homelessness and our housing crisis, that we need to be flexible, adaptable, and innovative. And these are skills that I will take with me to City Council. You know, we talk about, you know, leadership and lived experience. You know, I've been working with the folks of District 3 for the last 7 years. I've been listening to them. I've been working with them. I've been taking their ideas and their concerns to our elected leaders that are making these bigger decisions. I want to be able to do that in a bigger way with our community. I want our community to know that they have representation that looks like them, that has had lived experiences just like them, that is actually there to listen and do what's best with them for their communities, and not do something for myself. This isn't about me. This is about making sure that our residents are taken care of, that our city grows and expands, and that we are that world-class city that we keep talking about. We are in this housing crisis. We need more housing built that lower income folks can reach, that our middle income folks can get. You know, we're talking about working class families. We're talking about our essential workers. You know, millennials who right now, depending on the type of work that they have, being a homeowner is probably not within their reach. You know, I'm 46 years old and I just got my first home thanks to the help of my family. It's a little studio here in North Park because I wanted to be able to invest back into my community. But I know that there are a lot of folks that aren't able to do that. And so on City Council, and as their elected representative, I want to help them get there. I want people to know that their government does care about them. We're not out here making decisions that are going to affect you without telling you what those decisions are. This is very personal to me. There's no greater endorsement than that of your community members. I'm very proud to be endorsed by Senator Toni Atkins. She was the first person to endorse me. I also have the endorsement and support of the Honorable Christine Kehoe and Congressman Scott Peters. You know, these are folks that have served in these city positions. They've seen the work that I've done over the years, the volunteer work that I've done, and the connections that I make, and how I really do just want to do what's best with our community. And so, of course, I would love to have your endorsement. I appreciate the time that you've given us. I appreciate the time that you're giving to all the candidates and making all of us aware of who's out there and what we plan to do to help support our community and move San Diego forward. And I hope you all are safe and well. I know these have been very trying times. We've had too many loved ones that we've lost, friends and community members. But together we're going to get through this, and we're going to make a better San Diego. So I appreciate all of your time. And if you're in District 3, don't forget to vote Toni D.
Thanks, Toni. I appreciate you both coming in today, taking the time.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Have a good rest of